are available on the city website on the calendar. Can I please have the clerk call the roll?
Counselor Aration,
Present.
Counselor Bays,
Present.
Counselor Feltner,
Present.
Counselor Gannon,
Present.
Counselor Gardner,
Present.
Counselor Izzo,
Present.
Counselor Palumba,
Present.
Counselor Picciarelli,
Present.
President Sidiris.
Present, just so everyone is aware, Councilor Gannon has joined us by Zoom this evening. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the first item we have on the agenda, and I'm going to first explain what we're going to do this evening to the city council. We are going to do our interview and then we'll do our deliberations after we conduct these public hearings so that all the people that are here don't have to sit through us having our discussion. So we're here tonight under the new charter. There was a position that was created called the Municipal Policy Analyst, which was an opportunity for the city council to find ways to get additional help for all of what we do here. So there was a screening committee set up, which consisted of Councilor Bays, Councilor Gannon, Councilor Picciarelli, and Councilor Gardner. They interviewed many candidates. We went through one round and all of those first round candidates did not come forward to continue the process. So we went through another round, and tonight we have with us Doug Newton, who is the finalist that was recommended. There were two other finalists recommended, but they took jobs elsewhere. So we're here tonight to interview Doug Newton, and I want to welcome you up to the podium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're going to try to be as informal as possible. We want you to be comfortable. We're going to take turns asking some questions. And if you have, you went through some of the questions in your interview with the screening committee, but this is a very public process. The rest of the council is here tonight to hear what you have to say. So as we begin, please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you were interested in this position.
Sure. So my name is Doug Newton. I'm a 2019 graduate of the University of Maine. I'm also currently a student at Suffolk University in the Masters of Public Administration program, and I'm really enjoying that. Currently, I also work full-time as a legislative aide for State Senator John Keenan from Quincy. That's been a remarkable experience, and I really feel that it's given me the foundation for local government, which is really where I want to spend my career long-term. So when I saw this opportunity to work in public policy for a community that's just about 10 minutes from where I live, that's doing so much great work on climate, which is a critical issue for me, and just an opportunity to serve the people of this great city and its residents, I couldn't pass it up. And I'm very excited to be here and to meet you all.
Thank you. Let's go first to my left, and then we'll go to our right to ask questions, and we'll go to Councilor Gannon. Councilor Gardner, did you have questions?
Welcome, Doug. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you.
How would your colleagues and your boss describe you if I gave them a call and asked them to do so?
They would describe me as somebody who brings a positive attitude to every single situation, no matter how challenging it is. Somebody who's always up for the task, no task being too big or too small. They'd also describe me as somebody who's reliable and dependable. If I say something's going to get done, it's going to get done. If I say I'm going to be at place X at a certain time, I'm going to be there. And that I'm somebody who they're comfortable with in very public-facing roles. I talk to Senator Keenan's constituents very, very often, other elected officials, and I'm always cognizant of the fact that I'm there representing him. And I need to do right by him. And I think I have. So that's something I take a lot of pride in. And I think that's something that he and other supervisors would say about me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Palumba.
Going back and forth.
I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Counselor
No, I can,
Hayes, if you're
Yeah.
not ready,
no, I'm all set.
we can go in any order.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for your interest in the position. I just wanted to ask you one question, and I'm sure because your cover letter is excellent, and so is your resume. But can you tell me what was the most challenging core issue that you had to research for Senator Keenan?
The most challenging, so Senator Keenan right now, perhaps his number one priority, if not his number one priority, is a piece of legislation around the issue of revenge porn.
I
That,
didn't hear that.
oh, sorry. It's a piece of legislation around the issue of revenge porn.
Oh.
For those who may not know what it is, it's when somebody to shame somebody releases a sexually explicit video of them without their consent, even if perhaps the video may have been taken with their consent. We are one of two states, the other being South Carolina, that does not criminalize that at our state level. So a proud Massachusetts resident, I like to think we're always ahead of the game, but unfortunately on this issue, we're not. So Senator Keenan's taking the lead on fixing that. Why that's been so challenging? It's a really emotionally charged issue. I've spoken to one constituent stands out, and in such a public forum, I won't mention too much about her. But a family member of hers went through just a horrific situation, really horrific. And I've had a number of great conversations with her. She's one of the most impressive people I've ever met in any role that I've had. So honestly, some of the most important research I've done on that issue comes with meeting from constituents like her. And there have been many others, and it's not always quote unquote who you would think: men, women, LGBT people, straight people, everybody. So meeting with them and having conversations with them about something very difficult that's happened to them is a challenge for sure. But it needs to be done, and they're brave enough to do it. And I think that's going to carry me forward, hopefully in this role. At the local level, we deal with issues that people care about deeply and are very invested in, and rightly so. And I'm very comfortable having those kinds of conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Bays.
Hi, you actually hinted at the answer to the question I wanted to ask you, which was how has, you came to this position via the State House.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering how working at the State House and doing the job you did there has helped prepare you for a position here in a municipal office.
Sure. So Senator Keenan's very engaged with every single community in his district. So I've been exposed to a number of issues at the local level. I've met with veterans agents, town managers, directors of senior services, and that's just scratching the surface. And those are the folks that I've been the most impressed with, frankly, throughout my work in government. It also gives me a really good foundation on a lot of the issues that are most important in local government. Chapter 90, Chapter 70, MWRA, to name a few. These are issues that I've had a fair amount of interaction with, gotten some knowledge of. Senator Keenan, not directly before, but shortly before being state senator, was chief of staff to a Quincy mayor. So local government is extremely important to him, and I've gotten to learn a lot from him. Thank you.
Counselor Izzo.
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight, and
Thank you.
congratulations on making it to the second round. So my question is, how would you handle working for one senator to going to working with 9 counselors and balancing all the different maybe assignments or questions or research topics that might come your way?
That's definitely something I've thought about heading into this position. So we have a fairly large staff, well, 5 people in our Senate office. So tasks are coming at me all the time, and I'm often working with others to delegate who's going to handle them. So I've had some experience with that in the Senate. But what I would really draw back on, to your point, would be my experience at the Boston Bar Association, where I was before the State House. So they have a staff of roughly 30. And very often while I was there, they were short-staffed. It was heading into COVID, through COVID. Staffing was a concern for sure. So I was receiving tasks from folks who weren't my manager, in addition to the tasks from people from my manager. I took that as a compliment. I thought I was fairly well respected in there, and people knew I would get the job done, but it was a challenge because it put a lot on my plate. So I think communication is key. I was fortunate there that I had great rapport with everybody. So if I had 5 tasks on my plate and time might be a crunch, I always felt like I could communicate with my manager and discuss that with her. Could also discuss that with other managers if they were delegating a task to me. I definitely felt comfortable letting them know where I'm at. Asking a lot of questions, I think, is very important. When exactly do you need this by? Should this take priority over the other tasks that I'm currently working on? So those are a few of the things that I would do. Thank you.
Councilor Picciarelli.
Oh, thank you. So great to see you again.
Good to see you.
So the job is a municipal policy analyst, and you'll be working with councils of the committee as we write laws or do what we do as a legislative body. So one of the things, I think the primary thing you'd be doing is providing assistance to do research on new laws or ordinances
Mhm.
that we do. So, and we're working on a number of things, short-term rentals, snow shoveling ordinance. How would you approach supporting the committee to do research about, say, a new ordinance requiring snow shoveling? What steps would you take in terms of benchmarking and recommendations? How would you collect data, and what would you sort of organize that and bring to the committee with your research about a recommendation for a new ordinance?
Sure. So I would want to get a lay of the land as to the state of snow shoveling in Watertown right now, prior to the ordinance. What are the main concerns that residents have? What are the main concerns that residents on the council, that members of the council have? And what specifically is this ordinance seeking to address, and how specifically is it seeking to do that? I would also try to get a sense of what the residents of Watertown are saying about this. Has the council been receiving a lot of complaints from constituents that snow isn't being shoveled? Has there been one particular case that has really jumped out at people and kind of set this into motion? So just getting the lay of the land would probably be step one. Another thing I would do in terms of researching, and I know I brought this up in my first interview, but I think looking at what has happened in other towns and cities is very, very valuable. See what sorts of ordinances around snow have worked and have not. Did another municipality put into place a very stern regulation on snow shoveling that backfired? Or has another town put in place a very innovative regulation on snow shoveling that has worked better than expected? So I would do a lot of research into that. So those would be some of the steps that I would take. And in terms of ultimately how I would present it, I've had experience presenting data and presenting research through a number of different formats. I've drafted memos, I've given PowerPoint presentations, I've created much longer documents than memos and gone through those. So I'm comfortable really in any format. So I would make sure to discuss that with you to see in what format you all think would be best.
Councilor Gannon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And Doug, welcome back.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure interviewing you in the first round. And you have a wonderful background leading up to, you've had multiple internships and other displays of interest in public service. And you also worked for the Boston Bar Association for 2 years prior to working for Senator Keenan. Tell us about the Boston Bar Association. You worked on presentations, which I've attended, and helped a lot of very specialized, knowledgeable individuals work on a common goal. So how would you describe that experience as it relates to being the municipal policy analyst in Watertown?
Sure. So from the conversations that we've had already, I can tell that this is the kind of role in which I'd be dealing with a number of different people with areas of expertise that vary. And that's definitely the case at the Boston Bar Association. So I took point of a few different sections that they had. So one of them, for example, was the bankruptcy section, a group of lawyers who work in bankruptcy. Another one was their legal services section, a group of lawyers who work in legal services for folks who otherwise cannot afford to pay. Those are definitely two different groups, but I had to be able to balance them both and get to know them both and work well with them. And one of the main things that we were doing, especially as COVID hit, and I think this was what you were alluding to, Counselor, is webinars. The attorneys, thankfully, because we didn't really know what was going to happen when COVID first hit, but a number of our members were very, very enthusiastic about webinars and presenting their ideas to people, because you can fit a whole lot more people in a webinar, perhaps an unlimited number of people, than you can fit in a room. So I was managing webinars from sections like bankruptcy or delivery of legal services or our diversity, equity, and inclusion section. That section in particular got very large crowds, and we would have upwards of 500 people on this webinar. So in terms of being reliable at work, that was definitely something that the point was driven home, because I cannot, if I'm managing a webinar in which 500 people are expected to be present in 5 minutes, that needs to be well managed, and all the dots and the I's need to be dotted and the T's crossed. So I definitely refined that skill. And I learned a lot about a lot of different policy issues. Our bankruptcy section had a number of different initiatives around bankruptcy law. We had a civil rights and civil liberties section that was very engaged in facial recognition laws and restricting the ability of police departments to use that. I found that absolutely fascinating. So yes, it's a legal organization, but I did gain a lot of exposure to a number of public policy areas.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Asian.
Thank you. And thank you for being here and your interest in the job. Going second to last here, a lot of my questions have already been answered. You touched upon the challenges that you faced working with several counselors, walking us through the analyzing policy and how you would present it to us. So you seem like you're very you have great attention to detail. Is there an example that you can think of where your attention to detail has benefited you?
Sure. Thinking of a few. I would go back actually to the Boston Bar Association. So, and I alluded this to a little bit, but when we went from in-person BBA, for lack of a more formal term, to remote BBA, there was a lot of concern as to how we're going to make this work, because we had a great deal of revenue generated by in-person meetings. We had members that counted on these meetings for networking purposes and other professional goals. So that was really, really important that we still delivered that in a remote format. And a lot of thought and consideration went into exactly how we were going to do that. And as we went about that, we needed to make sure that we were using the proper platforms. So Zoom was the obvious one that everyone was using, but we wound up using a platform called Remo, which I think has gone slightly out of style in the past year or so, but it was very useful for group networking programs. So we had essentially, it could create a virtual room just like this, where some folks are sitting here, some folks are sitting there, and they can all have separate conversations with each other. That really allowed us to replicate the networking formats that were such a big part of the core of the BBA in a virtual format. I was put in charge of that virtual platform, and it was new to everybody, myself included. So I had to become an expert in it as fast as I possibly could. And for me, I threw myself right into the deep end. I attended some tutorials, and then I said, okay, I'll take point of these programs. And just from doing more and more, I learned more and more, and we were able to really take it to the next level. So being able to pay close attention to what that program's capable of, making sure that I am managing it in a way where our programs will go smoothly. That was something that I think benefited me a great deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Feltner.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Some of my questions already been answered as well. In particular, I'm interested in the legislative benefit and your research and analysis. Two things. I'm wondering if you could speak to, you mentioned legislative software such as laws on your resume. And then also just, it looks like you're still in a master's program. Is that a full-time thing, or what that looks like, and balancing that with this potential full-time job?
Sure. So laws, for the first part of the question, is a software that we use in the State House to track legislation, and it has other purposes as well, but that's the core of it. So if I need to figure out where a bill is at, who filed the bill, when is it scheduled for a hearing, or has it even been scheduled for a hearing, I go to laws for that. And after a while, you get a pretty good sense of how it works, and I've been able to get a good sense of it in terms of bill research. For the second part of your question, yes, I'm a Master's of Public Administration student at Suffolk. It's part-time, 2 classes a semester. I worked full-time for Senator Keenan through that. Work always took first priority over school. That was something when I was considering where to go to graduate school, most of the questions I was asking the folks I was speaking to revolved around that. How am I going to be able to make sure that I'm still giving it my all at work? So that is absolute top priority. Whenever there was a conflict between school and work, I chose work. And despite that approach, or perhaps because of that approach, I still got straight A's at Suffolk. So I have an enormous degree of confidence that I can balance Suffolk with work. And I'd also add that to whatever extent the council wanted to have me modify my schedule or change my approach to grad school in order to make sure that I'm doing the very best I can at this job, I would absolutely do that.
So you just touched on one portion of my next question. First of all, you're going to be working with the council, but you'll occasionally be asked to work with city department and city staff to do what we need you to get information for us. And in that vein, we might actually ask you to come to a council meeting or come to a subcommittee meeting after normal business hours. Flexibility is what I would suggest would be very helpful.
Sure.
Is that possible? And would you be amenable to something like that?
It is 100% possible. And yes, I would be absolutely amenable. So Suffolk has a number of hybrid course options, virtual course options. And I have known a number of folks, classmates of mine, who've had similar arrangements. And the professors and the faculty there have been nothing but accommodating in terms of making sure that we can all fulfill our work obligations. So yes, when I applied for this job, I saw that evenings would be required. And that is not a concern for me at all. I would never fail to attend a council meeting due to Suffolk.
Well, as someone that would be working closely with you, I would strongly encourage additional education of all
Sure.
any kind to not only you, to anyone that works for us that would like to help themselves in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Further questions from the city council? Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll ask one that I used to ask in the olden days, before I became a counselor in my prior world. When new people would join, one of our questions once they joined was, what's the user manual for Doug? Like how should the manager and peers interact, guide, lead, direct, coach, whatever, to ensure that your learning curve is as steep as it can be, that your performance is as productive as it can be and as efficient as it can be, and that you feel valued and wanted. So what's the user manual for Doug?
Thank you for that question. No, I appreciate that. I am somebody who values direct communication, clear communication. I like a level of comfort with my supervisors, and I've been fortunate enough to have that so far, to where if I'm having a dilemma and a task that I'm doing, rather than stewing in it and struggling, I would ask. So that's the kind of thing that I would definitely value. So clear communication. I like direct feedback and frankly, frequent feedback where I could have it, especially in a new role like this, working for 9 different individuals. I would want to know directly from each of you, what is it that you prefer? What is another format I could be using to present something? Maybe if I said something that could have been phrased better, I would want to hear that. So I think candor, direct feedback, and just a strong level of communication. Those are the things that I value the most. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the councilors? Councilor Feltner.
Thank you. Yeah. Can you speak to what kind of role you have had in actually drafting legislation and presenting that?
Sure. So Senator Keenan filed a number of bills this past January. I did not personally draft or write any legislation, so that was not something that I had a direct hand in. But I was involved in a number of those discussions, particularly around the revenge porn issue. That was something that we were hearing from constituents about, frankly, constantly, as sad as that is to say. So I was involved in a number of those meetings and informing our process as to how we would draft that legislation.
And I guess along those lines, in the job description, it particularly calls out the Budget and Fiscal Oversight Committee. So I'm wondering what experience you have with budgets or municipal policy around budgets.
Sure. So during the budget process, we heard from a number of different municipalities with their top priorities. So a core responsibility of mine was relaying those from the municipal officials to the senator, and having those conversations with those municipal officials to make sure that when I'm relaying it to the senator, that I can anticipate the questions that he's going to ask, that if they're conveying that this particular request is very, very important to them and a top priority, that I can convey that and why, because Senator Keenan's going to ask that. So that was a major factor of my responsibilities. The budget process at the state level, as we all know, moved quite slowly. So something that I'm very excited about in this opportunity is more accountability, is more of, if a budget were this late at the municipal level, I think more people would be saying things. So that's something that I really look forward to about this role, is being where you can really see the impact of the budgeting as I go around town. There's some of that at the state level, but not as much as in the local level. So that's something I would really look forward to.
So one other person that you'll probably be, if you are taking this position and we offer you this position, is the city manager. And I'm going to ask the city manager to see if he has a question for you as well.
Thank you.
So,
George.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Doug, for joining us this evening. I will first say that you're very much correct that if I submitted a budget on the legislative schedule, I probably would be in a lot of trouble with this council. Our charter sets out a very specific schedule for doing budgeting, and we do everything we can to sit with it and meet it. And I think that what's exciting about this year is there's some new things in our charter about the interaction between manager and council as it relates to building budget priorities and additional budget requests from departments and how we focus those and how we analyze those, that ensures that the budget is an ongoing process with steps that really run from October to June and then give us a little bit of a break for a couple of months before it starts up once again. I would say that one thing that is somewhat interesting about Watertown, there are 357 municipalities in the Commonwealth, as you're probably aware. Only 15 of them have city council and manager forms of government. A lot of the other cities, like I believe the ones in Senator Keenan's districts, are strong mayor systems. Most of the others are town governments where you're bringing budgets to town meeting. I think that just as an observation, there is something unique and valuable to this system in the collaboration between elected council and administration that works very well. I think the one of the interesting things about that piece is that the council essentially makes 4 hires: the council clerk, the policy analyst, the auditor, and my position. I'm sure Brendan and Megan will agree with me. I have good working relationships with the other 2 council appointees. I hope to do the same with the policy analyst. I'm interested in just hearing a bit of your thoughts on kind of as you studied public administration and had an interest in local government, kind of what you see as how a working relationship could work here, where the council's your boss, but we're kind of, all of us are on the same team doing the best for the people of Watertown, and what I can do to help you in the city manager role as you're helping the council on policy.
Sure. So working for just one state senator, he's obviously my boss, but I've worked with a number of different offices as well, in which often we are on the same team. Maybe they're a co-sponsor of a key piece of legislation. Maybe it's Braintree with Senator Keenan and shares with Senator Timilty, and we're working on a district issue together. So working with folks from different offices is somewhat comparable, and that's something that I've really enjoyed. I would really value working with you and learning from your expertise on planning. That's something that I've had some exposure to at Suffolk and in my career, but that's something I think I could really stand to learn from you even more. So to answer the last part of your question, that's something that would be really valuable for me. And yes, so working with folks who, yes, the council may be my boss, but working with you would be incredibly important and valuable as well. I've had a number of experiences with that in the legislature, working with other offices, working with other staff members who've maybe departed and are now working in local government or for an advocacy agency. So that's definitely something, kind of a multipolar environment that I'm very comfortable in.
Thank you. And President, I'm all set. Thanks. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the city council? I have one last Councilor Feltner.
Sorry, I thought I heard you mention Quincy, and I just wondered if you could talk a little more about whether it's through education or maybe don't have direct experience in municipal workings, and this position kind of really requiring a high level or big picture view because of working with all 9 counselors and collaborating with the manager and city staff.
Sure. So Quincy has a mayor, Mayor Koch. I've been in communication with his office numerous times. His chief of staff is really a remarkable public service professional, as is his entire team. So I've had a great experience with that. I know a couple members of the council, so I've learned a lot from them and met with them. So yes, I spent a great amount of time in Quincy. I was born there back at the now non-existent Quincy Hospital. I think it closed a year or two after I was born there. But yes, I was born in Quincy. Most of my family, aside from my immediate family, which is in Marshfield, most of my family is in Quincy. So I spent a lot of time there, a very transportation heavy city. So despite the MBTA being managed by the state, that's definitely something that the residents are aware of and that the council and the mayor need to be aware of. It's a city with definitely some challenges in regards to housing and affordability, which is certainly not unique to Quincy, but it's something I've gotten a fair amount of exposure to. And thankfully, there have been some really exciting developments there. So that's been really exciting. I love the city of Quincy. I love all cities in Senator Keenan's district, but Quincy definitely will always have a special place in my heart.
Thank you. It's great to see such an ambitious candidate between your studies and your work experience.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So we're going to wrap this up by asking you if you have questions of us.
Sure. What are some of the things that you all think it would be most important for me to get up to speed on so that I'm ready to succeed on day one?
Well, as I told you from the beginning, in the general public, this is a very new position here. And I think we would have to discuss as a council, or I would have to reach out to see what people think their priorities would be. And then you and I would sit down and discuss those. I have a number of things in mind, and I'm sure the rest of the city council does, and we're working on a number of issues that we could probably use your help doing some research on.
Sure.
But we have to prioritize that. So I would say it's going to take a little while to get going. I don't have anything to tell you now that can give you a concrete answer to your question, because it's very new to us as well.
Sure, I appreciate that. So you mentioned that I'd be working with the city manager as well as some other town officials. I was curious about that. So who are some of the other town officials that I'd be working with most?
Basically, we have a team here.
Sure.
We have a finance team, we have a planning team, we have the manager's office, we have our council clerk, and people will interact with you on different things when they, you might need to go speak to them about something that we're working on and get a better understanding. So, our city auditor who's here works for us, city manager works for us, and the council clerk works for us. Everybody else works for the city manager. So you're basically working for us, but you'll be reaching out and talking to these people to help us with the work that we're doing.
That makes sense. Thank you. Those were the main questions that were on my mind from our conversation. Just any insight that you can give me into the next steps would be appreciated.
Well, I want to first thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for going through the subcommittee process. We really appreciate that. The council will deliberate a little later on this evening, and I will contact you tomorrow as to how we move forward.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thanks for your
President.
time.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing and vote on an order relative to the acquisition of permanent easements and temporary construction easements for the Mount Auburn Street reconstruction project, and authorize the city manager to execute the order of taking on behalf of the city. And I'll first open it up to the city manager, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. And in a moment, I will ask Mr. St. Louis, our Director of Public Works, to give a little bit more background on this. But just for the council to have the key issue here is what we're seeking from the vote tonight is for the council to vote to allow us to do a series of takings. Now, takings, eminent domain takings, are often a scary sounding concept because it's ranges up to you hear that term used when people are acquiring property for public purposes and public projects. This is not a project where we're taking someone's house and tearing it down or taking someone's business and removing it. The vast majority of these are actually temporary. There's just a handful of them that are permanent. All of them are easements. They're essentially easements to allow the construction to occur on the Mount Auburn Street project. And most of them, again, not all, but most of them are temporary construction easements that just literally allow us to be able to work a little bit off the public right of way, where you have a sidewalk that runs right on a property line where you got to go a couple feet into the property to replace that sidewalk by where you're standing and how you're doing it. The federally funded projects such as this do require us to identify every property and every piece and do every taking in these circumstances. The damages, as they call it, the amount of money that we would then, using the project funds, be paying for a particular access to a construction easement, temporary easement, in some cases, in a few rare cases, permanent easement. The lowest of them are about $100. A lot of them are in the range of being a few $1,000s. So there are payments to be made here as required under this federal project process. I think one of the other key things I think that is worthy of note here is that because this is a multi-year project, the expectation of the way the project works is that we will issue a in many cases temporary, but like a construction easement that could last over a 5-year period, where in most cases, the amount of time our contractor is actually going to be there working in front of your house is a couple of months, maybe even a couple of weeks. But we need to have that easement access over the course of the project. So I know there's been some questions from the public about this. There's a process where should the council approve these tonight, we have to sign a bunch of papers to file these easements. And then there's a chance for individuals who are affected by this to be able to pick up a check from us for the value of that temporary taking or that permanent easement. And from there, we will be able to have access to complete this project. Now, I don't want to lose the fact that at the end of the day, what we are accomplishing here is a substantial upgrade to what is known to many as the bumpiest and most challenging road in the city right now. And we're going to create a much better Mount Auburn Street, something that we've done a lot of community meetings and community process over the years. One thing that always challenges me about these federal TIP funded projects that are on the federal program that comes through the state and comes to us is that it's been years and years designing, and it takes many years before you get to the point where you can actually start the project. And this is one of the last steps to actually getting this project underway. So I will turn it over to Mr. St. Louis, who can talk much more detail about the nuts and bolts of easements, answer your questions, and then hopefully assist you with anything that should come up with the public in the course of tonight's public hearing. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. St. Louis, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Mount Auburn Street has been on the tip for a little over a decade now. Federal process through the Transportation Improvement Planning process. The federal government through Mass DOT will pay for the construction of the roadway, but it's incumbent upon the municipality to pay for both the design, permitting, and the acquisition of any right-of-way needed for the construction process. And that's why we're before you tonight. We've been through the design process for a number of years. We've recently held several public meetings, including recently at Perkins School for the Blind, discussing right-of-way issues, parking issues, loading issues. The goal at the end of the day is to rebuild a street that hasn't been reconstructed due to either the catenary wires above the roadway or any number of other issues. Thankfully, the MBTA bus electrification program is happening. The catenary wires are able to be taken down, and concurrently, we're able to really rebuild this corridor through the city to a complete street standard. More trees, more bike lanes, safer pedestrian crossings, better landscaping and amenities throughout the corridor. So before you tonight, there are several easements along the corridor, literally ranging from 10 square feet to a couple thousand square feet, most of a temporary nature, so that if in the reconstruction of a sidewalk, a contractor would have to swing a hammer through the air over your property, we're required by federal guidelines to get an easement for that. If someone were to rest a 2x4 in the grass and it were to disturb the grass, they would have to replant the grass to restore it in kind. As you can imagine, in addition to the number of potholes in the corridor, there are a number of trip hazards in the sidewalk. All the sidewalks are being rebuilt to an ADA standard. So as we rebuild the sidewalk, if we come past your walkway or staircase or the entry to your business, we're making sure that any trip hazard there is addressed, that your walkway meets the rebuilt grade of the street. And certainly throughout this process, this is almost a 2-mile corridor. We can't be in front of every building in a 2-mile corridor. It's not possible. So we anticipate that the contractor that is will be awarded the bid going out September 10th, 9th, that they're going to have probably 2 crews in town working from each end in a substantial fashion, going block by block, so to speak. So we're likely in any given block for several months. We're in front of any property rebuilding your driveway apron or your walkway for several days or weeks at the most, maintaining access to your home in and out of your business during this process. And there's going to be a lot of continued outreach throughout this project. This is again, a $30 million project at this point that the city will be receiving through Mass DOT and the federal process. So there's going to be continued outreach from the contractor, from DOT, from my office, from the city as a whole, to make sure that on a weekly basis, abutters, residents, commercial properties know where we're going to be, anticipate what actions are going to occur, and continue to promote the businesses throughout this corridor as well. So we've gone through this process in the past in this community, I believe on Pleasant Street. I've been through this process and a number of other communities as well. The easements before you tonight are very typical in nature of this process. We've got a number of questions from staff regarding, why haven't we gone after donations through this process? And the short answer is the federal rules and regulations have changed. It's time consuming, and we're trying to meet a timeline to make sure that we maintain our spot in that MPO funding matrix that is in flux. If we risk losing our spot, then other projects are shovel ready and able to take those funds and delay our project. So maintaining our bid date is very, very important to the city. So again, temporary easements throughout the corridor, parking spaces are impacted on occasion. And our goal is to get the temporary easement so that if we impact the asphalt in your property, in order for it to meet the grade of the roadway, we can rebuild it. It doesn't mean we're taking your parking for 5 years. We're hopeful that the awarded contractor can complete this project in a sooner time frame, hopefully 4 years, but we add in that buffer time to make sure that if there are any delays in construction, we're not coming back again and again to revisit this issue. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions from the council.
Thank you. Since this is a public hearing, we will take questions and comments from the public. Then we will close the public hearing and turn to our legislative mode. So if there is anybody here or at home that would like to ask a question or make a comment, either raise your hand here or at home. I will recognize you under the council rules. You are allowed to speak for 2 minutes. So please, anyone raise your hand and identify yourself for the record. Seeing none, I close the public hearing and ask for a motion from the council.
Mr. President, I make motion that we approve the order relative to the acquisition of permanent easements and temporary construction easements for the Mount Auburn Street reconstruction project and authorize the city manager to execute the order of taking on behalf of the city.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Councilor Palumbo.
Thank you. I just want, there's quite a few of these easements, into the hundreds here. Do you need to have them all done before we can move forward, or can you do them in sections? Like if you're going to do this portion of the road, so you get the easements for this portion, and then you go further up and you get the easements for the next portion, or do you have to have them all done before the contractor can begin the work?
So the Mass DOT right-of-way process requires, the Mass DOT right-of-way process requires all easements be acquired prior to bidding. So
Prior to bidding.
and that's the project as a whole.
Thank you.
Questions on Councilor Feltner?
Thanks. I was mostly concerned with the few permanent takings. There's very small amounts, as you notice, in square footage. Can you describe, is it a matter of giving room to a utility, or I can't tell from the map, it has all the dimensions, but it doesn't,
Sure.
how it affects the public realm, let's say.
So one great example where I was on site today, we're realigning the intersection of Arlington Street at Grove Street. And as you know, right now, there's a number of slip lanes, concrete medians. In the future condition, there's actually a traffic signal there. So to improve some of the geometry and line of sight in pulling in and out of that intersection, I think we've all sort of been lined up heading to the square, looking over our shoulder at the truck coming down. That's not the safe way to design an intersection to current standards. So there is a taking at that location to accommodate the new traffic mast arm, tee up the intersection, create new lane assignments, and also create a new, create some placemaking in front of the, I'm going to call it the northwestern corner, and make a larger landscape plaza instead of just the concrete that's out there today.
Thank you. So it could be, so for instance, at Walnut and Mount Auburn or Lincoln, that there's a physical piece of equipment that you need that space for. It doesn't say what it's for, as far as I can tell on the map. I'm not an engineer, so.
Yeah. Depending on the location, you might see a very large black dot.
Right.
And that below grade, there could be a piece of concrete the size of this table, but above ground, you only see a light post. And it might be that the light post is in my domain, but the concrete under the ground would be on private property. And that's to make sure that usually that the sidewalk is wide enough to meet ADA regulations. We take that additional land to make sure that it's passable.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Councilor Gannon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Quick question, Greg, about tell us about the nature of the larger takings. I noted one that's 6 figures, 500,000. What are some of the larger issues involved with substantial dollar amounts of the takings? And curiosity for every single one of them, have the owners been notified before tonight's vote?
So substantial research has gone into this process. There's title research on every property in the corridor. Certified mailings have been conducted at least twice on the letters that have been provided to properties in this corridor. A number of residents have reached out back to us asking for their mailing addresses to be amended, or for someone to use a mailing address instead of the corporate address on the street. And we've been trying to work through some of those issues. There are a number of properties in this corridor, so certainly those meetings and discussions are ongoing. In regard to the larger properties, the largest one that you're referencing, I believe, is 705 Mount Auburn Street, the former Tufts building. We've been working closely with that property to address their concerns regarding access, staging, storage of equipment on their property. None of these easements proposed tonight are really for the storage of equipment in people's front lawns. That's not the goal of this. The goal of this is to make sure that areas can be restored in kind and wouldn't be prohibitive to reconstruction of the corridor. So in meeting with them, I think we're going to come to terms, or we're working to come to terms through a memorandum of understanding that they would be potentially amicable to waiving the funds associated with the acquisition of that easement. But those conversations aren't finalized by any means. So we're working through that currently.
Great, and thank you, Greg. And Mr. President, if I may, a couple of follow-up questions.
Sure.
Thank you. So in my own experience working with cities and towns on eminent domain takings, the amount listed in the vote tonight called a pro tanto award. It's what the government says the property is owed. But the property owner has a right of appeal if they choose to do so. And wanted to know about if someone chooses to exercise an appeal right with regard to the pro tanto damage award, would that delay the bidding of the project, or is that a separate process? The valuation is treated separately and the project will go on nonetheless.
So the federal guidelines were provided to all the property owners. They have, I believe, up to 3 years from the date of the order to appeal the appraisal of the property. The appraisal checks following a successful vote tonight would be available, I believe, at City Hall for future pickup, and those details will be laid out in another certified mailing to those properties throughout the corridor. A property disputing the appraisal value and going through the process would not delay the project at this point. It would run concurrently with the proposed bidding of the process by the state, of the project by the state.
Wonderful, good to hear. And one final question. There's certainly been a lot of local public hearings about all various issues with regard to this project. I mean, years before, and I applaud the town for the public outreach effort. So for those who haven't been following the process, there's a very strong business corridor along on Auburn Street, certainly in Coolidge Square and closer to the Main Street, but other places as well. So could you just please describe about the efforts that the project, the project leaders and the city have been and will be doing to ensure as minimal disruption to businesses as well as to residents?
Certainly. Prior to my coming to Watertown, I believe the 25% design had been reviewed by the council as a whole at some point in time. Unfortunately, I believe that was pre-COVID. So my involvement coming back on board, the community at large had advocated for another meeting following the 75% design submission. That meeting is actually not required by the state, and they advocated me to not hold it. But I didn't think that was right. So we held the public meeting, engaged with more citizens again. We've continued to do that meeting with the Coolidge Square businesses, working with some of our local counselors to review various loading areas and parking facilities. This is a project that it's truly balancing the users throughout the corridor. Everyone's compromising on something here or there. There are those among the constituency that want the road to remain 2 lanes throughout. There are those in the corridor that would rather see it be 1 lane in each direction with a raised bike lane. Some of those requests and ideals contradict maintaining some 100-year-old trees throughout the corridor. And certainly we're planting, probably to say it's over 100 trees. I don't have a count on me, but it's a substantial amount of planting that goes along with what you've seen Public Works and the city fund recently to combat our climate change goals and address heat island effect and improve our urban canopy. So throughout the corridor, I think we've tried to engage with as many folks as possible and come to the best compromise that we can to receive funds that we wouldn't otherwise have to rebuild the road in the first place. And I think this design addresses a number of transportation issues, safety issues, pedestrian crossing issues, resolves a number of conflicts where unpermitted activities may have been at the perimeter of the roadway that we're trying to, again, make safer. We've met with the MBTA and consolidated and relocated a number of bus stops to improve their operations, as well as the loading and unloading of pedestrians in those zones. So I think every facet of this project has really reached out to local and state leaders and engaged parties throughout the corridor to try to maximize the public input that we can to date. Moving forward again, my past process with other communities has been to create, monthly meetings with the contractor, with the administration, with businesses throughout the corridor, make sure their needs are being met, make sure they know what the construction schedule is with a 3-week look ahead, with a 6-month look ahead. And then as we drill down and we're in your block, you get those, the weekly letter saying, I'm anticipating being in front of your business on Wednesday, weather permitting. You've seen us do it with other roadway projects where we have door hangers that we put out, again, just to alert you, we need you off the road at this time, and we hope to restore your access by this time. And you're going to continue to see that in this road project as well.
Great. Greg, thank you so much for the description of public outreach, and thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to ask a question. So I do just one final question, and that is, will anyone interested in the project have a telephone number to call as a go-to person for individualized problems, like, the truck is blocking my driveway, that kind of thing, that residents, neighbors can call?
Unfortunately, it's not 1-800 St. Louis. But we will have certainly a 24-hour emergency contact with the contractor on board. That contractor certainly is going to have 24-hour contact through me and my staff to address any utility concerns, sidewalk concerns. We still have a number of hurricanes and snow events and other things in Massachusetts that we're going to coordinate heavily with those contractors, but we certainly will have a 24-hour number available as we proceed into construction.
Thank you so much, Greg, to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Feltner. Wait a minute. Somebody who hasn't spoken yet, Councilor Palumba is there anyone else that hasn't had a chance to ask a question that would like to ask a question? Okay, Councilor Palumba.
Thank you. Greg, you said the bid, all this has to be done before the bid goes out. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you've been doing a lot of mailings and discussions. And so what is the total number again of easements?
There's at least 214 temporary easements.
So of those, when are you thinking of putting the bid out?
So the state sets the bid date. Now that the plans are done, this is sort of the final local step in the process. The state puts out the bid, the state reviews the bids, the state awards the bids. The state sets the bid timeline and the bid date based on the project readiness. And we've been at risk for readiness based on things like the MBTA, responsiveness to comments, the catenary lines, things of that nature, really dragged out the process 2 years ago, 1 year ago, where we had to respond to comments that occurred late in the game. So it's a very programmatic process from the state level.
But if you have 214 to 230 easements to get done before they send out the bid, how many of them are done? How many of them have you got the signed letters back or the signed agreements with the?
So these are not donations. These are takings.
These are, 1 second, if I can ask Attorney Rich to try to explain this portion, please.
Sure.
Thank you, Attorney Rich.
Thank you very much,
This
Mr.
is,
President.
let me just explain, this is unlike what we used to do where people would donate, they'd come, they'd do a street, we'd donate our 1 foot section of our property and we'd move on. This is a different process and I want to ask Attorney Rich to explain it.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was a good introduction.
Sorry.
I think it's important and you've heard a lot from the superintendent, and it's important to remember that the regulations have changed. They've become stricter. They've become more precise. And one of the issues specifically is to address that the takings must be undertaken. All property rights must be secured in advance of the property or the project moving forward to the bid process. And as the council president alluded to in previous times, we've had the ability to go out and negotiate and obtain waivers of damages and donations of the property rights. And the problem with that, as indicated, I think the superintendent alluded to this, is that creates delays, creates problems. And so now the process is to simply go through a full Chapter 79 taking process, which requires appraisal of the rights of the property, and then proceeding with an order of taking with a pro tanto payment offered to each of the property owners. That pro tanto is the value of the property as determined by the city through this appraisal process. So what needs to be recognized is that tonight, what's before you is an order of taking based upon a proper public purpose, the street project that's moving forward. Once the taking is authorized by the city council, by your vote, and it goes on record, and we have to get it on record within 30 days of the action of the city council. Our expectation, we're trying to hold all the pieces together, and the hope is that we'll actually, based upon the vote of the council, not presupposing, because obviously you still have to vote, but should the council vote to approve this order of taking and approve all of these easements, temporary and permanent, it is our intention to go to record tomorrow. So tomorrow it will go on record. Once it's on record, the easements are effective. The city now holds those easements. It is effective. Nothing else needs to be done. The pro tanto payments would be available to be collected, and there's a process by which the residents can come and sign off and take their payment. There's also the ability, as the superintendent discussed, to negotiate and seek some waiver, some release of the payment. There's the ability to undertake that, but effectively as of tomorrow or whenever the recording occurs, based upon the vote of the council, the rights will have vested in the city. I know there's been some discussion about notice, and I know at least one party raised an issue about whether the city had provided a proper 30-day notice. And I think that what's important to recognize, and hopefully the individual will recognize, is that the provision that talks about 30-day notice also talks about how that notice provision is not applicable to a taking undertaken by the city. I know the city has done a great deal of outreach and a great deal of work on this, and I think we're in accordance with the statutes. But to the councilor's question about whether all this has been accomplished, it will be accomplished tonight based upon the council's vote, and tomorrow based upon the recording at the Registry of Deeds.
Councilor Feltner.
Thank you. Two things. I'm wondering if you could confirm that the state is managing communications with ongoing MBTA service on the corridor. And the other is kind of outrageous question is, I know is there ever gone outside 5 years, or if like some catastrophe happens, or 5 years is totally adequate amount of time to cover this project to fruition?
I mean, that's why it is such a long period of time. The construction schedule at the start of construction is going to have a forecast out all 4 years of, what their intentions are. And if that schedule was unacceptable to DOT, they would have the contractor apply more resources to make sure that out of the gate we're ahead of schedule. I will say the projects that I've seen that have languished have been those that encounter utility issues mid-project. As you have seen in the last couple of years, we've been making sure that National Grid does get out of the way. I've done some supplemental water work that was not deemed necessary previously to make sure that we can shut down the water main if and when we ever had to. So new gate valves are being installed throughout the corridor. The catenary being a huge issue already took a delay. If I had put this project forward trying to work under the wires and then the MBTA had come forward, absolutely we'd be having that conversation. I wouldn't be able to avoid it at that point. But DOT is going to heavily work with the MBTA as well the contractor about what detours or bus stops need to be reworked. All those details are going to be flushed out during construction. Are they going to work on just the north side of the road, then do the south side, or if it's block by block? We'll have to work closely to make sure we're not detouring into other issues throughout town.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a roll call, please?
Counselor Oration,
Yes.
Counselor Bays,
Yes.
Counselor Feltner,
Yes.
Counselor Gannon,
Yes.
Counselor Gardner,
Yes.
Counselor Izzo,
Yes.
Counselor Palumba,
Yes.
Counselor Picciarelli,
Yes.
President Sidiris.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is a first reading on a proposed loan order that the sum of $261,568 is appropriated to pay costs of funding year one of a centralized managed services plan in the fiscal year 2024 as part of the IT cybersecurity capital plan. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight's item is a first reading. This is relative to an item that is consistent with the capital plan and a significant upgrade to the security side of our IT systems for addressing cybersecurity, disaster recovery, and any of a number of other issues as it may relate to management of our IT systems. There's some onboarding costs and initial startup costs to this project. And due to that, we're seeking a loan order for $261,568. Mr. McClure is certainly available here, but being that it's a first reading for a public hearing to be scheduled in September, my intent tonight is just to make sure to move through that first hearing process this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is communications from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. Being that this is a special meeting, I don't have a lot. I just wanted to take a moment to share with you that our Recreation and Public Works team recently had a public meeting at Casey Park with neighbors around Casey Park regarding the proposed project over there. Now, if we take a step back to the capital plan process that we did this past year, there were a number of park projects that had been scheduled in previous fiscal years that I tried to work with the staff to line up in order in which they were going to be done. Casey was one that had been designed many years ago that had not been able to move forward yet, that we wanted to try to start advancing towards complete design in order to be able to move this to construction in the near future. We did a community meeting. We got some good feedback. We came to the conclusion that it is not the end of that community process. Oftentimes we bring projects to you after we put them out to bid for a particular cost that we are seeking to borrow for. In this case, I wanted to give the opportunity for the council, if you wanted to dive a little bit into what's going on with some of those conversations in a council committee meeting, to have the ability to do that. So I placed that here as an item for referral if that is of interest to the council. Thank you.
In conversations with the city manager, and I know a lot of us had been contacted by a few people about this project, and this project was last laid out, I think, in 2018 or 19. I suggested that we send it to committee. So tonight I'm asking for a motion to send the Casey Park design update to the Parks and Recreation Committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Must be a roll.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to do a roll call, John. Sorry. Roll call, please. I keep forgetting.
Counselor Bays,
Yes.
Counselor Feltner,
Yes.
Counselor Gannon,
Yes.
Counselor Gardner,
Yes.
Counselor Izzo,
Yes.
Counselor Palumba,
Yes.
Counselor Picciarelli,
Yes.
Counselor Oration,
Yes.
President Sidiris.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Manager?
Mr. President, just a reminder once again that the farmers market continues here at Saltonstall Park on Wednesday afternoons. The summer concert series is ongoing, and that we have the upcoming Labor Day holiday. We remain on summer schedule through the Labor Day holiday weekend, and I look forward to seeing the council for our regular meeting on September 12th, where I will have more updates. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the first item on our agenda, which was the municipal policy analyst. And I'm going to come back to the council and I guess ask for a motion first, and we can have a discussion.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we, council authorizes you as president to negotiate with Doug Newton for the position of the municipal policy analyst.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Councilor Bays.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we had a lot of really good talent come before us in the, in our committee. And Doug really, even with all of the various people we interviewed and the people who really were very strong, Doug really shone out and was one of the top people in this, in our, who we interviewed. We really all unanimously felt in our committee that he would be a great asset to the town.
Council Petrelli.
I will, Mr. President, I agree with Councilor Bays. He was excellent in the interview. He was one of the top, for me, one of the top candidates in the, of the people we interviewed. You saw that his manner of speaking, his public speaking, his grasp of the fact, his length of experience working in government. And I agree, it's like state level government as opposed to municipal level government. But the fact that he was working very closely in the district with the city of Quincy really sort of gave him a good feel of how municipalities work. He's got what he's done, particularly with his experience with Boston Bar Association, shows quick learner, able to deal with crisis, move forward, bring people together, get things done. I feel very confident that he could easily move into this role and do a great job for the council.
Any other comments? Councilor Feltner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I think we have an excellent candidate before us. I just thought it was important for myself to be on the record that I have concern about this being a full-time position. And I know this was decided a while ago, but seeing how things have played out, the new city manager, and we're adding a lot of positions in staff and other departments. And I see a lot of overlap between the city attorney and staff and technical expertise and the council clerk. We still, what we especially need is coverage at our committee meetings, just getting minutes and reports out so that we could all participate in the meetings. And I guess I'm just curious how perhaps the president sees this unfolding as a full-time job, and per his questions to us, like where our priorities are and what we're going to have somebody work on. Because many of the, I said this during charter review and during the drafting of the description of the job, that our needs kind of come and go when it comes to policy making and topics depending, and we are in a great time of transition now and updating all our ordinances and new issues that have come up, although we've worked through a lot of things this term. So I guess I, in particular, just would like to hear maybe from the president or the steering committee or the manager as well, since this sounds like it'll be a collaborative position, what we see on the horizon. And I know it's new, as you already mentioned, and will kind of be evolving. But he's definitely a great candidate. And I guess I'm a little concerned about him being bored, honestly, right now. So
Let me just first say, I appreciate your concerns. I have some too, but this is not the appropriate place or time to do that. We're actually talking about just requesting me to negotiate. I do think that we do have to have a discussion, possibly as a committee of the whole, to discuss what we're looking for this person to do, because, it's not just going to be up to me. He's working for everyone through me. So I think that we will work those details out at a later time, but I do think this is not the appropriate forum to do that at this point.
okay, thank you. I just think it's important for the health of the position and a new person coming on, as well as for how we work. So it's good to hear that we're going to have some future discussions on that.
Get ready for another meeting. Are there any other comments on this? I want to say that Doug was very comfortable here tonight. Doug was easy to talk to. We've seen interviews where the people that sat in front of us weren't comfortable even being here. And I think that it shows that he understands somewhat the municipal process and what he's getting into if we do come to an agreement. So, I mean, I think I'm comfortable moving forward, but I do have some concerns about once we catch up, what happens? And is this really a full-time position? But that's not for tonight. Councilor Gannon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I too was on the screening committee, and we subjected him to over an hour of interviewing, shorter period than this evening. And Doug struck me as someone on top of his game. He's on the rise. He's obviously very well organized and very ambitious. And public policy is his chosen career. And we need Watertown will benefit well with someone so determined and someone who is forthright and someone who has shown an ability to be very diverse and approaching different issues and different people. And as to working full-time and going to graduate school at night, I did that as well. And I balanced everything. I guess the same would say with a new parent. People who work a different job or raising a child, they learn to prioritize, and that would be a skill that would definitely benefit his service to Watertown. So I applaud Doug, and I urge others to vote in support.
Any other comments? Roll call, please. The motion is to authorize me to negotiate with Doug.
Counselor Feltner,
Yes.
Counselor Gannon,
Yes.
Counselor Gardner,
Yes.
Counselor Izzo,
Yes.
Counselor Palumba,
Yes.
Counselor Picciarelli,
Yes.
Counselor Ration,
Yes.
Counselor Bays,
Yes.
President Sidiris.
Yes. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I have two very important announcements. Because they're happening, one of them's happening before we meet. One of them is to put on the calendar. On August 31st at 4:30, we're going to have a ribbon cutting and a tour of the modulars at Moxley, at private first class Moxley Field. The public is welcome and invited. So if you want to put that on your calendar, see what beautiful work has been done there for our temporary high school. It's really nice. And the second thing that please add to your calendar is that we have finalized a date to meet with the planning board on the comprehensive plan. And that's going to be on September 21st at 6 p.m. at the middle school. Pardon me? All right, well, let's pencil in September 21st. That will be our evening for the comp plan. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Gannon,
Yes.
Counselor Gardner,
Yes.
Counselor Izzo,
Yes.
Counselor Palumba,
Yes.
Counselor Picciarelli,
Yes.
Counselor Ration,
Yes.
Counselor Bays,
Yes.
Counselor Feltner,
Yes.
President Sidiris.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.